Greetings and salutations again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We are still continuing in Chapter 1. Um, Alfred Rosenberg, the Nazi Party ideologist. All right. Um, so get comfy, get cozy, get yourself a nice beverage. I got mine. And yeah, sit back and enjoy. Rosenberg found Weininger's attitudes towards women as congenial as his racist fantasies. He declared that men thought systematically, while women thought lyrically. Male thinking was synoptic, while females thought atomistically, whatever that means. Rosenberg believed that the principal role of women was to preach the maintenance of the purity of the race. In Rosenberg's eyes, the growing emancipation of women was a disastrous mistake. He rejected absolutely any notion of the equality of these sexes, which he identified with liberal values that, in his view, had nearly destroyed Germany. Rosenberg believed that the whole notion of human rights was not simply an illusion, but a dangerous mistake. Biology had created two genders, and the differences between men and women were innate rather than cultural. Women were inferior to men, and only through restoring the natural order of things with male headship and female subservience could the errors of feminism, artificially created by an intellectualism of the most depraved kind, be overcome and reversed. The role of a woman was to preserve the race, to maintain domestic virtue, and uphold morality. Feminism was a symptom of decay and invented by the Jewish intellect to try and destroy the Aryan race. In 1919, Eckhart introduced Hitler to Rosenberg, and his influence upon Hitler's ideology was decisive. Rosenberg was obsessed with anti Semitism, anti communism, anti capitalism, anti Freemasonry, and anti Christianity, as well as having a deep hatred of lesbianism and a bizarre compulsion to collect musical instruments. I want to pause there. Okay, you have all his antis, but like, what is collecting musical? It's whatever. He not only believed in the Thulian origin of the Aryan race, but was firmly committed to the creation of a new human type that would dominate subhuman races and move humanity onto a higher plane through occult methods. Both Eckhart and Rosenberg believed in a very strange kind of religion. On the whole, the ancient pagan faiths had worshipped natural forces and had believed firmly in the importance of making life on earth as happy as possible. These two men were convinced that the material world was not simply illusionary, but evil. They saw it as the duty of the human race to seek to evolve into a level where it would be able to live on a non material plane of existence. The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Rosenberg had lived in Estonia when it was still part of Russia. The Bolshevik Revolution forced him to flee, and he lost all of his wealth. When he arrived in Germany as a penniless refugee, he had only one weapon in the attempt to regain his former privileged status. This was a copy of the notorious Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, a work that claimed to be an account of the secret proceedings of the World Congress of Jewry held at Basel in 1997, my apologies, and which allegedly laid down plans for world Jewish domination. Rosenberg knew perfectly well that the protocols were a forgery, but he also realized that their potentially explosive effect if they were widely disseminated. After reading Auf gute Duscht, he went to see Eckhart and presented him with the manuscript of the protocols. A tremendously excited Eckhart arranged for their publication in a German translation. He also invited Rosenberg to join the Thule group and later introduced him to Hitler. Rosenberg arrived in Munich in 1918 and joined the German Workers' Party in January of 1919. I forgot to read the word November. He arrived in Munich in November of 1918 and joined the Workers' Party in January of 1919. Hitler did not become a member until October of 1919. Rosenberg did not publish his ideas in book form immediately. Instead, he began by writing articles for Eckhart's newspaper. In late 1919, he completed his first full-length manuscript, The Trace of the Jew Through Changing Times. In this bizarre, rambling, and often incoherent work, he claimed that the colors of the new national flag introduced by the Weimar Republic, red, black, and gold, represented three different aspects of the alleged Jewish high command and their goal of world domination. In Rosenberg's paranoid imagination, red stood for Jewish Bolshevism, black for Jewish anarchism, and gold for Jewish high finance. He said that the black, red, and the gold internationals represent the dreams of Jewish philosophers from Ezra, Ezekiel, and Nehemiah to Marx, Rothschild, and Trotsky. He also declared that not only was Freemasonry yet another front for the conspiracy, but that England, the land where Freemasonry originates, was the center of world Jewry. The Freemasons had been accused of political involvement by conspiracy theorists for around 200 years, but it appears to have been Rosenberg's particular contribution to declare firmly that it was specifically Jewish conspiracy. In his second book, The Crime of the Freemasons, he engaged in a tirade against Jewish Masonry. He soon converted Eckhart and Hitler to his way of thinking, and within a surprisingly short time, it had become the orthodox view among far-right party movements. Rosenberg himself was appointed to the position of the party's official ideologist. His job was to provide facts to support the various claims made by its spokesmen. He also played a large part in formulating the basic philosophy of Nazism. Another 2 books followed before his edition of the Protocols became an international publishing sensation. Rosenberg added an extensive commentary on the work and prepared the book for the press. As he had hoped and expected, the effect of the Protocols was immediate and worldwide. They launched an international anti-Semitic movement, and even through the Times, which had begun by taking them seriously, was able comparatively to quickly demonstrate that the work was a forgery. The Protocols became an integral part of anti-Jewish propaganda employed by the far right. Hitler, of course, became totally convinced of the genuineness of the Protocols in spite of the fact that even Rosenberg knew they were a forgery. In the first German edition of the work, Rosenberg carefully stated that as matters stand today, it is impossible to adduce juridically conclusive proof either for their absolute authenticity or for their fabrication. When he came to write Mein Kampf, Hitler declared that they were not only genuine, but they also showed clear proof of a Jewish conspiracy in the world. The myth of the 20th century. This is probably going to be the last section I read for this portion, and we will pick up, because this is quite a long chunk in this first chapter. So I'm going to finish this section, and then I will see you again in the next video. The myth of the 20th century. Adding to the huge influence that his introduction of the Protocols to Germany had wrought upon Hitler and the Nazis, Rosenberg also worked on his most ambitious book, The Myth of the 20th Century. It finally saw publication in 1930 and was the second most popular Nazi work after Mein Kampf, selling over 1 million copies. Even Hitler described it as one of the most important the most important formulation of Nazi policy other than his own work. It has become fashionable to underrate Rosenberg's influence upon Hitler. Certainly for the last 3 years of the war, he was relatively ineffective, but that was far from being the case for the majority of his political career. Hitler thought so highly of him that following his own arrest and the failed Munich Putsch in 1923, he appointed Rosenberg as party leader, a position he retained until Hitler's eventual release. When the Nazis came to power, Rosenberg enjoyed authority over a wide range of activities, hardly a sign of incapacity or of being undervalued by the leadership. While never in the same class as Goebbels, Himmler, Bormann, or Heydrich as an administrator, he still succeeded in having more of his policies carried out than the majority of Nazi leaders. One moment. My apologies, I had to take a drink. My mouth is kind of drying up. Where was I? The majority of Nazi leaders. The enormous influence that Rosenberg had on the Führer's thinking is demonstrated constantly by Hitler in Mein Kampf, in table talk, in many of his speeches, and in the various conversations he had with other people, particularly those recorded by Hermann Rauschning, governor of Danzig. Rosenberg was sometimes referred to as the keeper of the faith or the conscience of the party. However incoherent and repellent his ideas may appear today, they had a profound influence on the Nazis, particularly upon Hitler. In the myth of the 20th century, Rosenberg claimed that materialism and individualism were dying creeds and that they would become submerged in the group identity of the Volk. He believed that Atlantis lay in the far north and was the original home of the Aryans. Rosenberg also denounced Catholicism with considerable venom and praised what he called the martyrs of free research. In his mind, these included the Albigenses, Waldenses, Cathars, Arnoldists, Stedingers, Huguenots, and Reformed Lutherans. This suspiciously miscellaneous assortment of religious dissenters had almost nothing in common with one another. Jeez Louise, I can't read. With one another, besides the fact that they had all fell afoul of the Catholic Church. The Huguenots and Lutherans disagreed with each other on almost every issue. The Waldenses attracted persecution for their attacks on wealth and privilege rather than for any significant doctrinal issues with Catholicism. The Arnoldists and Stedingers were obscure and of no real significance, and the Cathars were identical with the Albigenses. It is not surprising that Rosenberg's hatred of materialism led him to lavish his greatest praise on the Cathars. Like them, he saw the physical world as evil and something from which we should all seek to escape. In Rosenberg's eyes, the spirit is trapped in the material universe, and only through the renunciation of the world can it become free. To him, the true purpose of mysticism was to enable humans to evolve beyond their physical bodies and life on earth and to enter the higher realm of the purely spiritual existence. By contrast, Rosenberg believed that the Jews were the arch-materialists, totally committed to a life upon earth and a worldly view of human behavior. He denounced Judaism and the Jews as enemies of the spirit, and in a passage extraordinary even by his standards, declared that to strip the world of its soul, that and nothing else is what Judaism wants. However, this would be tantamount to the world's destruction. In the myth of the 20th century, Rosenberg examined the Cathars in considerable detail. He made his admiration for their beliefs plain, and in particular saw their version of Christianity as superior to that of the Catholic Church. Rosenberg saw Catholicism as a corruption of the Christian religion and believed the Cathars were the guardians of true Christianity. In his eyes, although Luther and Calvin had been right to condemn the Catholic Church, their criticisms of it had not gone far enough. Both Luther and Calvin believed in the literal truth of the Bible as the revealed Word of God, and reverenced the Old Testament at least as much as the New. By contrast, Cathars rejected the entire Old Testament and much of the New Testament as well. Rosenberg saw St. Paul as another tool of the vast Jewish conspiracy. In his eyes, Paul had realized that Christianity was spreading and was threatening to replace Judaism. Paul, therefore, was sent by the rabbis to corrupt it. If it had not been for Paul, Christianity would have lost its Jewish elements and would have been an anti-Semitic religion more or less along the lines of Catharism. Rosenberg denounced Christianity for its failure to recognize the inherent superiority and inferiority of the world's various ethnic groups. He rejected the idea of original sin and declared that the Germans were born noble. He also condemned its belief in personal immorality. Rosenberg never made entirely plain what alternative view he held on the question of human survival of death, but almost certainly his own preference was for the theory of reincarnation. All right, I'm going to stop there. We've hit the 15-minute mark. We will resume on Rosenberg and the basis of Nazi law. I will see you then. Take care and have a nice rest of your day. Peace.